just 1 minute. Clear. So Ramsar site. At the time of joining the convention, each contracting party undertakes to designate at least one wetland site for inclusion in the list of the wetlands of international importance. So the inclusion of Ramsar site in the list embodies the government's commitment to take the steps necessary to ensure that its ecological character is maintained. There are over 2,300 Ramsar sites on territories of 170 Ramsar contracting parties. Here, the countries with the most sites are United Kingdom, where it has 170, and in Mexico it is 142. In Bolivia it is largest area under protection. This also can be a possible question. Which of the following countries have maximum area of wetlands under protection under Ramsar list? Answer is Bolivia. When it comes in number, it is United Kingdom 170 followed by Mexico. Done. So we need to remember, but don't know, if our luck doesn't favor us, they might ask those kind of questions also. So we also have one particular Montrex record, which is also somewhat closely associated with this particular wetland itself. It is a register of wetland sites on the list of wetlands international important. So the list which is maintained of those wetlands which are equally important, like which are important completely on the basis of its ecological character. So those are listed in this particular Montrex record, where changes in ecological characters have occurred in that particular ecosystem, are occurring as of now, or are likely to occur as a result of technological developments, pollutions, or human interference. So Montrex record will be making a list of such kind of wetlands which have huge amount of importance at the international level, which are degraded already or which are degrading as of now, or there are chances that it would be degraded by degraded in the future, either by the pollution or by the human interference. So such kind of all the list of sites which are present, they would be present in Montrex record. And it is not true that the list of record of wetlands which are present in the Montrex record, the same has to be in Ramsar sites. They might ask this, they might give you this statement also, like in the consider the following statements, like Ramsar sites and Montrex record sites are almost similar. They might be similar, they might not be similar, but it is maintained as a part of Ramsar list. That's it. Done. So if you see, these are some of the important wetlands in India. Apart from this, also we have some other wetlands in Uttar Pradesh which are been recently added. So within the map we did not got it. So you try to compensate that, please. So recently, what are the Ramsar site list which have been added? Only this diagram I have got in the internet, so I have just put it so that by imageal aspects you would be easily able to understand. That's the reason I have put it here. So apart from this also we have certain Ramsar sites in India. You try to focus upon them also. So but first at least try to remember them. Post that try to see what are the contemporary aspects whereby we had involvement of those particular Ramsar sites. If you see in Jammu Kashmir, you have 4 such kind of wetlands, which is the largest as of now. So Uller Lake, as everyone know, like the Jhelum river turns itself into Uller Lake. Hukero wetland, Surinsar, Mansar, Somoriri. These are the 4 wetland sites which are present in Ramsar list. And if you see in Himachal Pradesh, the Pongdam Lake, clear, which is important. Chandartal wetland, which was in news earlier. Renuka wetland, this was a question asked by UPSC. Is it an artificial lake? Which of the following are artificial lakes? They have asked this question. Clear. And if you see in this particular Punjab region, Kanjli, Harike Lake, which is associated with the Sutlej river, and Roper Lake also, it is very, very important. So these are present in this particular Punjab region. And the most important 2 in Rajasthan. Do remember. Yes, absolutely. Priyanka. So if you see in Rajasthan, these two are very very important, Sambar Lake and Keoladeo National Park. So they might ask you this question: Keoladeo National Park is a Ramsar site. Keoladeo National Park is UNESCO's World Heritage Site. So they might ask something related with this. The flora of Keoladeo National Park, the fauna of Keoladeo National Park is very important because it is listed in every convention, right? Lonar Lake, yes. Sur Sarovar, Sokar, yes, recently added, yes Priyanka. So I exactly don't have the list, that's why I'm not spelling them. So if you see the Nal Sarovar bird sanctuary which is present in Gujarat, it is also present over there. And see this Boj wetland, very very important in Madhya Pradesh. Clear? So this is also very much important. And Koleru Lake in Andhra Pradesh. Right now divided Andhra Pradesh. It is also one of the most important one. And Point Kalima in the Tamil Nadu region is important. And Vembanad, Sastankota, Astamudi, three in Kerala are highly important. They have high ecological significance. In the terms of ecological value, they have high amount of significance. Please try to remember them in Kerala. And most effectively, please try to remember those which are present in the northeastern states. The Deepar Bean, which is present in the Assam region, is important for you. Loktak Lake, which is present in the Manipur region. Rudrasagar, which is present in Tripura. They are highly important for you. They are having high amount of significance. And East Calcutta wetlands, which are present near to the deltaic region of Ganga. And Bhitarkanika mangroves, which are the second largest mangroves in India, which are present in Odisha. They also fall under this particular Ramsar site. And Chilka Lake. So Chilka and Koleru Lake both are present in Ramsar sites list. Clear? So try to remember them as much as you can. As Priyanka ma'am has said, the recently added one. So some are present in Upper Ganga Plain, some are present in the Kashmir region. So you try to remember them. On this basis, how the questions would be framing. So either they would be asking the questions in one regard, that arrange the following wetlands from north to south. They will be asking this question. Or if they want to make it difficulty, they will ask from arrange the following from west to east. This is second probability. Third probability, they would be asking, they would be giving you three wetlands and they will ask you, these three wetlands are located in which of the following states. Like they might give you Chandartal, Renuka and Pongdam Lake and they might ask you in which of the following states they are located. Or they might ask you, in Himachal Pradesh, which of the following wetlands which are having Ramsar site, which are present in Ramsar site are being given in the question. Excuse me. Clear? So recently, which are added? They might ask you recently what are the wetlands which have been added. Either they might ask, this is also a probability, or sometimes they might ask you these questions. They might give you wetlands on one set and they might give you states and they might ask you to match. So this is the most probability, the most best probability that UPSC can ask a question on this, or directly they will be asking. Consider the following statements related with the Ramsar Convention. So Ramsar Convention 2 refers to this and this. They will give a statement. And next, Keoladeo National Park, Sambar Lake and the wetland which is present in and around the Mathura region is present in Ramsar list. So they might confuse you with the options. So you please have a clarity. You don't get confused at all. Try to focus much on this particular list of wetlands. There are high chances that you would be getting the questions. There are immense chances that you would be getting the questions from this particular regard. Done. So is this clear until now? So probability of Ramsar Convention is very much high. Try to focus on them as much as you can. High chances are there that question would be coming on Ramsar Convention. There are high chances. Next, if you see the biodiversity conservation. So biodiversity conservation is very important. Clear? So the biodiversity is nothing but the interaction which happens between the biotic components. Clear? So when we protect the ecosystem, when we conserve and protect the whole ecosystem, its biodiversity at all levels is protected. Example, if we say the entire forest to save the tiger, this approach is in situ conservation. So if you are protecting a forest, tiger within the forest would be absolutely protected. So if you are protecting the forest ecosystem, then the tiger biodiversity which is present, the tiger, one of the most important fauna which is present, that would be protected. Simply, biodiversity is nothing but the combination of flora and fauna, living and non-living organisms which are present in that particular ecosystem. When they come in interaction with each other, that is called as biodiversity, and that interaction which happens over there, that is called as ecosystem. So the interaction which happens, that is biodiversity. Clear? So when there are situations where an animal or plant is endangered or threatened and needs urgent measures to save it from extinction, ex situ conservation is the desirable approach. For example, if entire ecosystem is fine, but it is only tiger which is poached, so when tiger would be lifted from the forest and it is protected in the zoological park, then it would be called as ex situ conservation. Simply, in a very simplest of simplest forms, I will be saying, if tiger is protected in its own natural habitat, that is forest, that is in situ conservation. That is in situ conservation. If tiger is lifted from the particular forest because of this poaching issues, and it is protected somewhere in the zone which is artificially created, that is called as ex situ conservation. It is very easy. Clear? So in situ conservation in India, if you see, in situ is a on-site conservation, that is the place where it is present. If you are conserving there itself, that is on-site conservation of genetic resources in the natural populations of plant and animal species. So if you are protecting the plant or animal species in their own genetical location where it has born and lived for the years, then it would be called as in situ conservation. In India, ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as biosphere reserves, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, reserved forest, protected forest and nature reserves. But out of this, you have to remember biosphere reserves, national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, reserve forest, protected forest or nature reserves. There is nothing a necessity that you have to remember. So totally we have 18 biosphere reserves, and we have few amount of national parks and few wildlife sanctuaries which are very important, which have to be dealt at any cost. You have to remember them. So like we have 18 biosphere reserves, somewhere around 114 national parks and somewhere around 500 plus sanctuaries. Are you going to remember everything? If you are going to remember everything, believe me, you are going to become an environmentalist. Never ever you are going to crack UPSC. So my principal suggestion is only those things which are in news, which are in a contemporary way, which are repeatedly coming, which are always in news. So such kind of national parks or biosphere reserves to be remembered is very easy. So listing out and remembering biosphere reserve is like legally accepted, because we only have 18 in number. So those 18 biosphere reserves can be easily make a add upon. We can remember them very easily. No issues with it. Clear? So India have somewhere around 18 biosphere reserves, 104 national parks and 500 plus wildlife sanctuaries. Clear? So plantation, cultivation, grazing, felling trees, hunting and poaching are the prohibited in biosphere reserves, national park and wildlife sanctuaries, but with some small technicalities. Clear? In wildlife sanctuaries, with some permissions, the local tribes can use the natural resources. But when any region is declared as a national park, no such kind of economic activities are present, but it entirely depends upon the regional forest range officer. Clear? And in biosphere reserve, along with all the considerations, socio-economic conditions can also be accepted. If you see, like I'll say a simple difference. between national park, wildlife sanctuary and biosphere reserve. If you are only protecting that particular animal which is huge in number, for example, if you are protecting tiger over there, then it would be considered as tiger reserve, or it would be considered as tiger wildlife sanctuary. Then, so if you are protecting one particular species, that is wildlife species over there, they are considered as wildlife sanctuaries. But along with protection of wildlife, if you are protecting the entire ecosystem over there, then it is considered as a national park. If you are protecting the wildlife, if you are protecting the entire forest, and along with that the surrounding socio-economic conditions, if they are calculated, then it would be called as biosphere reserve. Biosphere reserve is a larger term whereby one particular biosphere reserve may have n number of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. It may have 3 national parks and 2 wildlife sanctuaries involved in it. Together the project network might be considered as one particular biosphere reserve, like Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. It has Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, it has Bandipur National Park, it has Nilgiri, it has Nilgiri Tiger Reserve. So when any biosphere reserve term is accumulated, biosphere reserve refers to a larger term whereby it can be involved upon with multiple national parks and multiple wildlife sanctuaries. So please try to remember this. If you see national park, which is very important, high chances and probabilities. Last time also 2020 paper, there was a question on the basis of desert national park, and they have deeply asked that question. No one has known, like they have asked it like desert national park is extended in 2 districts of Rajasthan. Somewhere question was in this way. It was present in actually Jaisalmer and Burma region. And the second option they have given it like desert national park have no human habitation present over there. See, when it is spread across and along the 2 districts, do you think that no human habitation would be present over there? With a simple logic, when 2 districts when it is spread, obviously human habitation would be present. And third option exactly I don't remember, but that kind of question on the basis of national park was asked. Before that year, the question was on biosphere reserve, and this time there might be question on biosphere reserve and national park. Very less questions would be coming on wildlife sanctuaries unless and until some contemporary issue has happened on that particular aspect. Done. So if you see national parks, they are areas reserved for wildlife where they can freely use the habitats and natural resources. The major difference between a sanctuary and national park mainly lies in the vesting rights of the people living inside. Unlike a sanctuary where certain rights can be allowed, in national park no rights can be given. National park completely it would be having some fencing aspects. If you see, if you go to any national park, much amount of involvement of humans happen. But in wildlife sanctuaries, we would be having involvement of the local community people, like especially tribal population who lives in their forestry. They would be having certain rights of using the natural resources of that particular region. Clear? So no grazing of any livestock shall be permitted inside a national park, while in a sanctuary, chief wildlife warden may regulate, control or prohibit it depending upon the situation which is present. If like in those regions, if we are having high amount of threat towards that particular ecosystem, then the chief wildlife warden may prohibit it or may stop it. That depends upon. But at least in sanctuary, they would be allowing certain rights for usage, for grazing of animals, or taking the wood for domestic purposes, clear, or collecting some natural resources from the forest. It can be allowed. But in national park, no such kind of scenario would be involved. Clear? See, if you come to biosphere reserve, as I have said, large areas of protected land for conservation of wildlife, plant, animal, resources and traditional life of tribals live here. So in general, what happens is when any region, if it is declared as biosphere reserve, along with the protection of the wildlife over there, along with the protection of the ecosystem, the local socio-economic conditions would also be calculated. If you see general zoning of a biosphere reserve, so this particular biosphere reserve would be having generally 3 zones. Zone number 1, core area, which is the central portion. Next is buffer zone, and next is transition zone. So no one is allowed into this particular core zone. It is completely under monitoring. Complete fencing would be there. No human involvement would be present. No one with any permission can be entered into this particular core area. No human involvement mostly would be done. So surrounding that area we would be having buffer zone, where we would be having bit amount of tourism, where we would be having bit amount of settlements, like local tribal hamlets can be lived over there. Along with that, education purpose, clear, scientists for doing their research would be involved and they would be allowed into this particular region. So for education, tourism, for research, entire aspect buffer zone would be used, and tribal hamlets would be living in this particular buffer zone. So their socio-economic conditions are protected here. So the last zone is transition zone. Here tourism would be involved, like research would be involved, and also we would be having education purpose. We can live over there, and settlements generally would be happening in the transition zone aspects. Clear? So majorly we would be having this biosphere zone. So if this is a biosphere reserve, within this we may have multiple national parks. Here we may have one national park. Here we may have one national park. Here we may have one wildlife sanctuary. So biosphere is referred as a larger term. Do remember this. Biosphere is referred as a larger term where it has multiple involvements of protected areas in its in situ conservation levels. Are you getting this point? So ex situ conservation, if you see, as this approach is desirable only when the limit of extent has crossed, then this particular ex situ conservation comes into picture. As in the initial minutes itself I have said, this particular ex situ conservation refers to the taking the threatened animals or plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in specially setting artificial habitats for their protection. Like some tigers you can observe, they are protected by taking up into the zoological parks, and some plants are placed in botanical gardens and wildlife safari parks and seed banks. They serve this purpose of ex situ conservation. So when in the in situ levels, when the limits have crossed beyond for protection of that particular ecosystem, then only ex situ conservations would be followed. Otherwise, simply if one particular species is threatened, if it is like if we have 100 tigers in one particular reserve forest, if one tiger is being threatened, then those tigers, entire 99 tigers won't be shifted to the zoological parks. If we have only 3 species left out over there, if one species have been threatened, like one species have been poached or hunted, then those 2 species would be lifted from there and that would be placed under ex situ conservation, that would be taken to the zoological park and that would be placed over there. Clear? So please try to remember, but don't focus on this ex situ conservation, just its a definition is important. Ex situ conservation refers to the protection of animals by taking it away from its particular natural habitat. Clear? And in similar way, for protection of this biodiversity, we have certain hotspot locations. I'll give the list of national parks next, but first initially we will try to understand what are the different keywords. So what are biodiversity hotspots? So every geographical region has its own importance of flora and fauna, and if there is high amount of threatening for this particular flora and fauna, and maximum flora and fauna has been threatened list, under threatened list, then it would be declared as biodiversity hotspot. So simply biodiversity hotspot refers to those regions with high species richness and high degree of endemism. Biodiversity hotspot refers to high species richness, that might be the species of flora and fauna, and high degree of endemism. What is endemism? Can anyone say what is endemism? Can anyone say what is endemism? What is endemism? Endemism: if that particular species belongs to that particular habitat, if it is not found anywhere, unique to that particular area. Yes, it is true, Akilendra Singh. When that is unique to that particular area, which doesn't cross its natural habitat of that area, found in that particular place, it is called as endemism. So when you have any high degree of endemism, and when you have high amount of species which are involved over there, so those regions can be considered as biodiversity hotspots. The British biologist Norman Mayers coined the term called as biodiversity hotspot in 1988 as a biogeographic region characterized both by exceptional levels of plant endemism and by serious levels of habitat loss. So if any region have high amount of endemism, and if it is under the severe levels of habitat loss, then that particular biogeographic region would be considered as biodiversity hotspot. And according to this particular aspect, like any region to be considered as hotspot, it has to meet two strict criteria. Do remember these two particular criteria. One criteria is it must contain at least 1500 species of vascular plants, clear, as endemics, which is to say that it must have high percentage of plant life found nowhere else on the planet. A hotspot, in other words, is irreplaceable. Simply it is nothing but it has to have 1500 species of vascular plants as endemics. So we should find 1500 different species which are not found anywhere else in the world. This is first criteria which has to be fulfilled. And next criteria is it has to have lost at least 70% of its original habitat. In other words, it must be completely threatened. So the natural vegetation which is present in that region, out of that 70%, if its habitat is completely lost, either because of the human intervention or because of the pollution aspects or environmental degradations, if that 70% of its original habitat would be lost, then that would be considered as, when these two criteria are fulfilled in that particular region, that would be declared as biodiversity hotspot. And in such a way, we have few biodiversity hotspots in India. The first one is Himalayan region, which includes the entire Indian Himalayan region and also that Himalayas which falls in Pakistan, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, China and Myanmar. This is one particular biodiversity hotspot which we have. That means entire Himalayan section which falls under Indian subcontinent, clear, that would be one particular biodiversity hotspot. What is the next biodiversity hotspot in India is Indo-Burma region. It includes entire northeastern India, leaving Assam and Andaman group of islands. And it also includes Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia and South China. So the entire northeastern region and Southeast Asian countries, including this particular, like excluding Assam and Andaman Nicobar Islands, they fall under this Indo-Burma hotspot region, Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot region. Then third one are Sunda lands, which are the third biodiversity hotspot. They include Nicobar group of islands, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei and Philippines. This is one particular biodiversity hotspot which is located. Please do remember these three. Entire Himalayan region is one biodiversity hotspot. Indo-Burma, Assam and Andaman are eliminated. Apart from that, Southeast Asian nations are also included in that. Third one is Sunda Land, which includes Nicobar group of islands and Indonesia, Myanmar, Singapore, Brunei, Philippines. All these come under this particular Sunda Lands biodiversity hotspot. The next hotspot is Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, which includes entire Western Ghats until the Sri Lankan extension. So this is also one of the 4 biodiversity hotspots which we have. Eastern Himalayas, which was originally part of Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot and included Bhutan, northeastern India and south central and eastern Nepal. Clear, those particular ranges, Eastern Himalayas, were also added into the main set of Himalayas. Done.